Okay, this is my first attempt at doing anything in the way of videoing or YouTube videoing, especially. So I was talking to my daughter this morning, by the way, happy Thanksgiving, and she's like, Mom, I didn't learn how to do these things because I wasn't in the house all the time growing up, and I need to learn how to make some of the family recipes. Okay, definitely. So we're going to start with this one. This is my mother and my maternal grandmother's recipe for homemade noodles. And so I've already made one batch this morning, but I'm going to have probably a fairly good sized crowd. And so I'm going to redo the video and I'm going to make a second batch. The homemade noodles are something that you don't want to double the recipe of. My experience has been if you try to double it, it ends up being a failure. So we're going to go ahead and get started because I'm running out of time. So I'm going to take a cup of AP flour and make a little mountain here. And in the top of my mountain, I'm going to make a fairly good dent. And in my dent, I'm going to put in 1 egg in my little dent here. I'm going to add just a dash of salt. Don't want too much salt, it'll make it tough. I'm going to add just a little bit of baking powder. You don't want too much salt because it'll make it tough, and you don't want too much baking powder, otherwise when they cook they will fluff up way too much, and we don't want that either. So excuse me while I'm looking for my fork that I have set aside. So in addition to my salt and my baking powder, I'm going to add just a little bit of milk. Doesn't matter what kind of milk. I'm using vitamin D whole milk right now. We'll leave that off. So now I'm going to start stirring my moisture into my flour. So what we're going to end up doing is basically making like a pie dough consistency here, so that we can roll it out. And so this takes a little bit. So I'm going to try to work rather quickly. I'm getting kind of a late start in making this particular video. Like I said, I don't know which one I'll post, the earlier one or this one. We had to reposition my smartphone. Thank goodness for cell phones these days that no longer have an 8-minute time limit on them. Thanks to my husband today for helping me with this, even though I kicked him out of the house and out of the kitchen because basically I don't want him listening to me while I'm making this video. He can see the end product. He did help me get this all set up in order to capture me and everything that I'm doing and not cutting me off like the first video at like the chin. So, okay, this is a little dry yet, so I'm going to add just a little bit more milk into this. I don't want it too wet, but I don't want it too dry. I definitely want to form, like I said before, a pie crust type dough. So I don't use a pastry cutter to do this. I actually like using a fork because mostly it's habit, and 2, because I can actually feel the dough, if that makes any sense, as to what kind of consistency that I'm getting here. So get my egg and my milk all in here nice and tight, and I think I'm still a little on the dry side here, so we're going to put in a little bit more milk. So get this going. Like I said earlier, you don't want to try to double the recipe. I don't know if my daughter has. My daughter has actually learned how to make the homemade noodles. It is the one that she did experiment more with, and actually I think successfully mastered doing this. So lucky her. Okay, I think we got enough moisture now that we can actually start forming a dough. So just like with pie dough, we don't want to work with our dough too much with our hands, simply because of the fact it'll make them tough. Just like adding too much salt will also make dough tough. So you do have to have this perfect medium. So I apologize, my wax paper continues to move on me, even though I did moisten my surface first here. I do not own a baking sheet that I can roll things out on. I hope to have one of those someday when I grow up and become a great baker. Definitely not a chef. That is my son-in-law's realm, not mine. So he is the pastry chef of the family, even though he is way too far away and we do not get to enjoy some of his creations like we would like to. Okay, so I've got this at a consistency, maybe even a little too damp, but that's okay. We're gonna be okay. So I'm gonna add a little flour to my surface here. Not a whole lot. I don't want it too dry. Okay. But I want enough so that my rolling pin will not stick too. So get enough of this in. Okay, so rolling this out, I actually want this to be longer rather than wider. Of course, you know, if you are making a pie crust, you'd want it round. And we definitely do not want this round. So I want to get this rolled out so that it is pretty thin. Less than 1/4 of an inch, okay? We want it really, really thin. If you have it thick, you're gonna end up with, of course, very thick noodles. You do not want thick noodles. It will take them way, way too long to cook and actually get done. And you don't want to do that. And if it takes too long and they're too thick, then they also end up tough. And that's not a pleasant experience either. So, okay, I'm going to turn my dough over. See, I'm already getting a little too moist on the bottom. Getting wrinkles. So, let me get this rolled out pretty thin. He said, and you want it thinner than what you would have it for a pie crust, for sure. With a pie crust, even though it is thin, your pie crust, of course, when you make it, has to be thick enough in order to withstand your filling in your pie, right? So we don't want that for noodles, though. I'm getting long enough. I'm coming off the end of my counter. So, and yes, you heard my timer go off, so I'm going to have to step out of the picture for just a second in order to actually take a pie crust out of the oven. So, because as I'm doing this, I am actually making Thanksgiving dinner. And somehow or another, my dough here is getting curved, but that's okay. I don't mind. So let me take this pie crust out of the oven real fast before it gets too brown or burns. Okay, perfect. All right, so that can sit there and cool. Okay, so I'm back again. I apologize. I wasn't expecting that to really happen quite so quickly. All right, I'm going to put just a little touch more of flour on here because I want to make sure I don't have a lot of moisture in here. I want this to be fairly dry. So starting at one end, I'm going to very gently and fairly loosely roll my dough. And I said I probably have this at least a 1/16 of an inch thick. Like I said, you want it really thin. This is noodles, so you want them thin. And you want it even, so you make sure that you get it rolled out even. Okay, so here is my dough. So I've got my egg dough. It's looking good. So then I want to take a sharp knife, and I'm going to slice this. I'm going to make approximately 1/4 inch slices as I go through. Make them fairly even. I'm probably not doing my son-in-law proud. I am not a chef, and so I am not overly adept at fast dicing, slicing, or anything else, but that's okay. I'm not a chef, and I don't profess to be. I am a home cook, at least when I am home. So, all right, so I'm cutting these up in 1/4 inch slices, thereabouts. You can make them as wide as you want, but I am feeding a crowd. So because of that, I want to make sure that I have plenty. So 1/4 inch thick, 1/4 inch wide rather. Okay, so I've got them all sliced up. So now I'm gonna take each one of these rolls and I'm gonna unroll them. So I'm gonna unroll them, I'm gonna lay them out flat because I want my noodles to dry somewhat. And I want them to rest. So I'm gonna lay them out so they can begin the drying process. As far as length of time, you can let them dry for however long you wish to. They do not need to be like completely dried out, where they're dry and anything like that. It just needs to be so that they lose that little touch of dampness that they kind of have at the top. You want kind of that middle part to dry out just a little bit, so they don't fluff too awful much. So I'm going to get these out. So as you can tell, so these are very long from having been rolled up. So what I'm going to do is, you know, kind of like eating spaghetti. If you have company, you don't necessarily want long noodles if you're fixing spaghetti, right? Because it could get rather embarrassing if you don't know these people really well as you're slurping through your noodles. Well, homemade noodles like spaghetti are no different. We don't want them, you know, feet long. So what I'm going to do is once I get all of these rolled out, I'm actually going to take my knife again and I'm going to cut them. I'm going to shorten them up. I'm going to cut them in probably 3 to 4 inch lengths, just to make it easier to cut, makes it easier to serve out of the bowl, makes it easier to cook in the pan, etc. So now, as far as cooking goes, since I'm not going to be actually taping that part of the process, let me tell you how this works. So my homemade noodles, my family dearly loves them. This is a recipe, as I said, that was passed down to me from my mother and to my mother from her mother, I believe. But these noodles, even though I seem to only fix them on holidays, Easter, Thanksgiving, and Christmas for us, they are very much enjoyed by my family, and as easy as it is, I don't know why I don't fix them more often. But these noodles can be fixed, cooked, boiled in any broth. So you could do this in beef broth if you're fixing roast for dinner or lunch. You could make this with chicken broth if you're going to serve chicken. Turkey broth, of course, at Thanksgiving if you're going to do turkey. If by some chance, like me, you are pescatarian, you're not going to do that. So I quit cooking mine in turkey broth some time ago. And since I am pescatarian, I actually boil mine in vegetable broth, and it works just as well. Now, if you can find a broth that is vegetable based, that tastes like meat, and you enjoy that flavor, it would be fine. You wouldn't have any problem. As far as the length of time, you want to boil these at least 20 to 30 minutes. So start with about 20 minutes, set your timer. At 20 minutes, in order to check for doneness, take one of the noodles with a fork and hold it against the side of the pan and cut it with the tine of your fork. If it cuts very easily, chances are your noodles are done. If it seems a little tough, if there's not enough give and you've got some pressure there in order to cut that noodle, it's not quite done. So every 8 minutes, set your timer, cook them for 8 minutes and check again. If you get to a point where you're really not quite sure if they're done or not, when you try doing the cutting test, take one out and actually bite into it. If it tastes like a noodle and it seems done to you, it's done. Remove it from the heat promptly. You do not want to leave your pan of noodles that are done on the stove to continue to cook, even if you turn the burner off. Because you will end up with a mushy mess. They will continue to cook as long as they have any heat source underneath that pan. So thank you for bearing with me. If you have any questions, I am going to post this to YouTube. I hope that this actually works out well for my daughter. This is my test. I'm going to be posting another one that she actually requested for a homemade dressing to go with spinach salad, which is a recipe passed down from my husband's mother, which my family came to dearly enjoy. And Grandma Edwards is thought very, very lovingly and remembered very lovingly at Thanksgiving and the other holidays now, every time I make her spinach salad with her dressing. So thank you for bearing with me. Hopefully this works out well, and I hope you'll join me again. Have a blessed Thanksgiving. Bye.